Hey guys, my name is Ronnie Brady. I'm a member of the Tempus debate and the Lincoln Douglas Resource Committee, and this is my presentation as an intro to framework. So what is framework? Your framework is a philosophy that the case starts with. This philosophy tells the judge how to compare which contentions may be stronger alongside your opponent's contentions, aka framework acts as a weighing mechanism in the round and helps the judge decide who wins the ballot. In common terms, and with opportunity to modify, these are the most common philosophies. Focus on the end result or focus on the actions individually that lead to the end result. So this kind of presents an outline as to how framework interacts with the other contentions and how it just creates like a broad roll of the ballot or a broad network that intertwines all of your contentions together. And the first component of your framework is the value. And the value is defined as the principle that you seek to achieve. Values in LD debate are generally very broad or very ambiguous values. And the two most common ones are morality and justice. However, values can also be topic specific. Examples is this nationals topic, or you can even use the September-October topic from 2020 this year that specifically refers to democracies in the resolution. So sometimes it's more strategic to choose a more specific value, such as governmental legitimacy or democracy. The second part, a component of framework, is value criterion, also called the standard. The value criterion is the philosophy used to promote your value. It's expressed as a verb. For example, maximizing net benefits, the verb for that is maximizing, and preventing coercion, the verb in that is preventing. You always want to phrase your value criterion as a verb, that like an action that you're actually doing. Because that's the standard that you're going to prove how like maximizing net benefits, that doing the action explicitly links back into your value. So yeah, you should always include some philosopher or author who warrants that criterion is the best way to achieve the value, and the value criterion should always be framed in the context of the value. You need to make sure that like your value and value criterion are intertwined in some way and they work together. Okay, so philosophies. Let's use this one scenario. There's a train coming, you can flip the switch and save 5 people, but kill 1 person. Or you don't flip the switch and kill 5 people, but save 1 person. Which do you choose? This is called the trolley problem and is often used to explain philosophies in debate and framework in debate. So yeah, there's this clear question of morality of what you do in this scenario. So there's one side that says to flip the switch. This side focuses on immediate action. You're responsible for the death of 1 person, but the end result is far better because yes, 1 person is dead. However, there are still these 5 people that are still alive. So just by like numerical, like how many people are alive versus how many people are dead, if you're valuing that, weighing that in this instance, then you would say the left side is better. However, the next side is don't flip the switch. This focuses on the ends. You're not responsible for any deaths, but now 5 people are unnecessarily dead. So the left side would what we call in debate the philosophy of deontology, while the right side is what we call utilitarianism or also consequentialism. So which do you choose? Utilitarianism or consequentialism, we often just call utilitarianism as abbreviated as util. So this focuses on creating the best ends. Example, the more people live. It's usually framed as maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. So this teaches that the ends justify the possible problematic means. For example, in this trolley problem, 5 people living is worth having to kill 1 person. So obviously, because under utilitarianism, you would simply look to how many people are alive at the end, and that's going to be 5 people, and you're going to tell yourself that that's bigger than that 1 person that's dead. So therefore, this justifies switching that switch. And as a value criterion, it can be titled as maximizing net benefits, but there are plenty of other ways to phrase this as a value criterion. And then the opposing framework our value criterion is deontology. This focuses on the means rather than the consequence. Example, the act of doing that kill, such as the act of flipping the switch. So deontology would support not flipping that switch. So doing an act that kills something itself is wrong. Actively switching that switch, doing the means as to get to the ends, whereas the deontology argues that the means is more important to look to than the ends. They'd argue, a deontologist would argue that whatever action that you're actually carrying out, if that's bad, if that's actively killing someone, then the ends don't justify the means. So this teaches that some actions should never be taken even if they could have a better consequence. For example, the rationale of killing to save lives would be rejected, and this can be titled differently depending on the subset of deontology you use. Example is upholding Kant's categorical imperative. Kant is a common philosopher you learn about for deontology. So his philosophy of deontology had many different certain subsets. So this is what this point is saying, is that there's many different ways to phrase this as a value criterion. Examples of upholding Kant's categorical imperative and preventing coercion. And then utilitarianism. So justifications for this framework include but are not limited to: governments use utilitarianism. Some rights must always be infringed. Extinction is the biggest impact. Brain studies show that humans are naturally utilitarian. Magnitude is greater than probability, or magnitude is a bigger impact or should be weighed heavier in the round. And then let's go into some responses to these justifications. If you're running, let's just say we're running a deontological framework, so from a rights or an action-based perspective. So first response would be: can't predict consequences, or no intrinsic value of individuals, and how can you possibly justify the oppression of a few, and how do you measure pleasure and pain? We brought up that example for utilitarianism of maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, and deontology, which commonly focuses a lot more on reason, would just argue that utilitarianism isn't specific enough, or isn't an actual framework that can be enacted. And deontology, so the justification for deontology include but are not limited to natural rights, self-agency, equality, preventing oppression, and this would argue that probability is actually a greater impact or a heavier weighing mechanism in the round than magnitude. So responses to deontology: if you're running a utilitarian framework, it's impossible to determine intentions of an action where consequences are always visible. If you think about that, consequences are, intentions are mental, so you can't just look at an action and say, read their mind and say, oh, that intentions were right, or the intentions were wrong, and that's how you judge the action, just because that's not realistic. So utilitarians will argue that only the consequences of what results from the action, that's the only thing that's visible. I don't know what actual intentions they had, so that's just what we have to go off of. So that's what a utilitarian would argue against deontology. And second point would be governments wouldn't use it. So basically, one of the justifications for util, the first one, if you remember on that slide, was that governments have to use utilitarian framework because, think about it, legislatures and policymakers were based on the popular vote, and laws that they pass, they judge on how many people it's going to help versus how many people it's going to hurt, and they have to pass that off of just simply the numbers, or they're not going to pass a law that only helps 1% of the population. So that's one of the arguments for util, is that it's a lot more real world applicable. It's used by policymakers in the real world. So that's a good response to deontology. And third, it doesn't dictate what to do, not what to do with people. And this the fourth point would be moral absolutism prevents any action at all, and it allows unlimited deaths of many because there's no ability to make a calculated risk. This is a really I guess a little bit deeper into deontology, but when you're linking morality into deontology, utilitarians would argue that because deontology doesn't quantify or doesn't give any numerical value of what's more moral under deontology, utilitarians would argue that it's essentially causing infinite regression, infinite deaths, because there's no way to make an actual calculated risk. So more frameworks, or most traditional frameworks, stem from the two general philosophies of utilitarianism and deontology, but there are a few specific ones that can be strategic. The third most common in Lincoln-Douglas debate is mitigating structural violence. This framework says that there are inequalities ingrained within a society that prevent certain people from enjoying general societal benefits. This excludes some people from defining morality and justice. And it's qualified with harms of structural violence, and ultimately stems from utilitarianism because it promotes a certain end. So yes, structural violence is simply the framework claiming that in the status quo right now, or in whatever world the resolution is acting upon, that there is structural violence preventing certain people, usually minorities, from enjoying benefits, and they specifically apply this to utilitarianism because utilitarianism justifies helping the majority over the minority. It's honest. It's structural violence is very strategically read against utilitarianism for that aspect. And some responding to structural violence. One, if you're running a deontological framework, again, you always want to hedge your framework against the opponent's framework. So if you're running a deontological framework, their framework is consequentialist, and respond accordingly. So just respond to that. Those other points that you had to utilitarianism that we mentioned earlier. And if you're running a consequentialist framework, just say that broader utilitarianism encompasses structural violence, simply saying that yes, there are minorities, however, we're going to help those people in the end. That's because they're trying to, they're not doing the action, they're still trying to help people stay alive. So that's an argument that protects utilitarianism from structural violence. And then onto pragmatism. So this is based on the word pragmatic, or basically practical, and examines how realistic or practical a certain action is. It's often related to implementing a proposed policy through a government. And the main argument is that if an advocacy cannot practically happen in the real world, then it has no potential to benefit anyone. So responding to pragmatism, you can utilize durable fiat, which, if we haven't talked about this before, is the principle that the purpose of debate is comparing the worlds where the resolution is affirmed or negated, so it assumes that their advocacy happens despite the logistic challenges it could face when implemented in the real world. It's basically just saying that debaters are given fiat, so we don't have to argue. It's essentially whether debate should be should the resolution pass, whether can it pass. So it's simply saying that to keep debate fair, debaters are given durable fiat, which is basically saying whether just assuming that the world is that the resolution is enabled to be enacted or enabled to not be enacted. So that's how you can respond to pragmatism, is just apply the durable fiat you have against it. And other frameworks is the social contract, based on Locke's social contract. Life, liberty, and property are promised by a government to its citizens. Its citizens are required to obey the laws and support the government, often financially, to be entitled to these rights. And this can be applied in a lot of contexts. You can say that what the other side advocates for violates the social contract, and when citizens do X, they break the contract, so they are no longer fully entitled to said rights from the government. And then respond to this by using a rights-based framework such as deontology. You could say that you contend humans are entitled to certain rights that should not be dependent on any outside factor, including a government, or apply your own consequentialist framework such as utilitarianism, and say that yours supersedes theirs, and that you have a gauge for total pleasure that encompasses the goods that the government is said to provide through the contract. And then other frameworks is the veil of ignorance, and this is based on John Rawls' theory of justice. This framework I've actually never heard it before on the circuit. It's always taught every year, so just know it, but don't worry about this. Basically, the main three I would say is structural violence, utilitarianism, and deontology, but be familiar with all of these. So just know these two principles. Liberty, people should be able to enjoy the maximum liberty as possible without intruding on the liberty of others. Liberty, in this instance, kind of acts as a value. However, it's also incorporated into the value criterion when you apply this John Rawls theory of justice. And second point is difference. Everyone should have an equal opportunity to prosper. This is written under the narrative that you don't know what kind of person you would be in a society. And you can kind of similarly respond to this as we did in structural violence. So frameworks for the autonomous weapons topic. Okay, never mind. For the frameworks for the November-December topic, that federal jobs guarantee topic, so one idea for framework for on the AF for this topic would be utilitarianism. So the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. Obviously, federal jobs guarantee would go to the middle class or the low class, which is the majority of American society, which the United States in the topic, the wording in the topic specifically applies to. So utilitarianism would be obvious for this reasons, and many they may sacrifice the private sector for the betterment of the public economy. One of the big critiques on the neg side of the AF is that the private sector jobs would fall because everyone would leave the private sector for the higher wages promised by the federal jobs guarantee. However, under utilitarianism, they would say, that's okay, we can sacrifice the private sector for the betterment of the public economy, the big nationwide economy. And then structural violence, this is also clearly defined, pretty obvious framework for this topic on the AF. So it helps the poor minorities entrenched in poverty, the federal jobs guarantee, by getting them out of poverty and breaking that kind of like systematic cycle of poverty that they're entrenched in. And because of structural violence, people are forced to stay in their $7.50 paying jobs and are deterred or prevented from elevating their status because of structurally violent factors. So that just kind of explains why structural violence applies to this topic. And yeah, so if you're running structural violence as a value criterion for this topic on the AF, you just argue that the federal jobs guarantee helps minorities, poor minorities specifically. It's kind of like this socialistic viewpoint on helping minorities by liberating like the economy, and it justifies the use of like governments as like interfering in the economy and like making this clear leveled so that poor minorities entrenched in poverty can also elevate their status and even out the economy. And onto the neg, the frameworks for this topic would be, sorry, that's supposed to say the November-December federal jobs guarantee topic, but on the neg, deontology or Kant, the government's infringements on the free market economy and that coercion is bad, which is a common argument made by deontology or Kantian frameworks would simply say that like mandating or like making this guarantee would take like a kind of like, I guess, like special individualized aspect out of the economy and kind of socialize or communize like the economy with the federal jobs guarantee. So deontologists or Kantian frameworks would say that this is bad, that it's coercion by making these people or incentivizing these people to leave the private sector and go into the public sector. And pragmatism framework is also pretty strategic on the neg. So it would be extremely difficult to implement a federal jobs guarantee as kind of a practical argument made on the neg. And who would finance this guarantee? Is there higher taxes? It kind of attacks like the methodology of this. So yeah, that is my introduction to framework. We went over a bunch of frameworks and how it works, and we also applied it to this upcoming topic. And remember, if you have any questions, feel free to contact the Tempus debate website and get in touch with any of our members there. Thank you for watching.